Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to dig in.
Awesome. So today we're going to be looking at the 𝗵𝗵𝗴𝗵 podcast. You familiar with it?
Yeah, Markus Spenger's work, right? Big focus on clarity and balance, especially for those of us, well, leading the charge, building.
You're not here to survive. You're here to live on purpose. My name is Markus Spenger and I'm a high-performance coach. And within this show, we're going to reflect on purpose, on clarity, on focus in your life. So enjoy this episode reflecting my content from the 𝗵𝗵𝗴𝗵 podcast from Austria. And if you really like the show, well, hit the subscribe button and leave also a comment there, and talk to you soon. And now let's have fun with the rest of the show.
Businesses constantly pushing for that next level, high performance, all that.
That's the one. And I know a lot of our listeners are right there with you, so this episode is going to be packed with some pretty relevant takeaways. We're specifically honing in on one of Spenger's conversations that really caught my attention.
I think I know which one you mean, the one that kicks off with that Buddha quote.
You got it. There is no road to happiness, because happiness is the road.
Yeah, I remember that one. It's deceptively simple, But man, there's a lot to unpack there, especially when you think about it in the context of, well, like you said, achievement, ambition, all the things that drive us.
That's what we're here for, right? To break it down, see how it applies to our everyday lives, our work, all of it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And Spenger does a fantastic job of making it practical, giving us some concrete things to think about and actually, put into action.
Okay, so let's get into it. Where does Spenger start with this whole happiness is the road idea?
Well, he jumps right into something I think a lot of us can relate to. It's that almost instinctive expectation, right? You hit that big goal, that milestone, close that massive deal, finally get that promotion, and then boom, happiness. Or, some dramatically different, better version of ourselves just magically materializes.
The arrival fallacy.
That's a great way to put it, the arrival fallacy. And it's sneaky,
Yeah.
because it kind of sets us up to always be striving, always looking ahead, but never fully appreciating where we are right now.
It's like we're constantly saying, okay, once I get there, then I can finally relax and I can finally enjoy it.
Right. But as Spenger points out, life's happening now.
Yeah.
In the striving, in the messy middle.
Totally. And he brings in a really cool story to illustrate this point. It's about Felix 𝗏𝗏. I don't know if you remember him, but...
He's a junior Olympic athlete.
Exactly. Nordic combined. Won a ton of gold medals. And, eventually retired at the very top of his game.
Like reached the pinnacle and stepped away.
Yeah. So in a way, you could say that was his arrival, right? He achieved what he set out to do. But here's the interesting part. He later decides to come back to competition.
Really?
Yeah, and this is where Spenger really digs in. He talks about how 𝗏𝗏's approach the second time around was totally different, like a complete 180.
Intriguing. How so?
Well, Spenger highlights that 𝗏𝗏 was really intentional about designing a training regimen that aligned with, his personal preferences, his lifestyle. He lived in this area in Austria, 𝗵𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵, surrounded by mountains, beautiful place. And he prioritized doing stuff he genuinely enjoyed, like, hiking, running in the mountains, especially when the weather was amazing. It wasn't just about grinding it out in the gym all the time.
So it was more about being present in the experience, not just fixated on the end goal.
That's it. And Spenger points out this really insightful realization that 𝗏𝗏 had. He said that during his first round of, those super intense Olympic campaigns, he was so laser focused on winning that he almost didn't even register the actual process. The training, the camaraderie with his teammates, all the little improvements along the way, all of it was just a means to an end.
I can see how that would happen. You're so driven, so focused on that one outcome, you kind of miss everything else.
And I think that's a huge takeaway for our listeners, Think about it. You've got that big project deadline looming, that crucial client you're trying to land, the next stage of growth for your business. How often are we so locked in on that destination that we forget to appreciate the everyday efforts, the small wins, the collaboration happening right now? It's food for thought.
Huge. And it sounds like 𝗏𝗏's second journey was all about, like you said, acknowledging and savoring those smaller steps, those everyday experiences, and finding fulfillment in that, not just the potential of winning another medal.
Exactly. It was a total shift in perspective. And Spenger really drives home that this applies to all of us, in every area of our lives.
Okay, so how do we actually do this? How do we move away from just the destination and start appreciating, the journey itself?
Well, Spenger gives us a really practical tool for that. Have you heard of the 6-minute diary?
The 6-minute diary.
Hmm.
Rings a bell. But remind me.
It's all about intentionally building mindfulness and gratitude into your day, and it's super simple. Like the name suggests, just a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the evening.
Okay, yeah, that's starting to come back to you.
So in the morning, you take 3 minutes, literally, and jot down 3 things you're grateful for. A really nice way to start the day, right? Prime your mind with some positivity.
Yeah, with that.
Then you set an intention for how you want to make your day a good one. Being proactive instead of reactive. And finally, you write down a positive affirmation. Just a little boost for your confidence and mindset.
Okay, and what about the evening?
Again, 3 minutes. This time it's about reflecting on the day and, thinking about personal growth. First, you think about something positive you did for someone else.
Building that sense of connection and contribution?
Exactly. Then you consider one thing you could do a little better tomorrow. Always striving to improve.
Yeah.
And to wrap it up, you note down 3 good things that happened during the day.
Nice. So it ends on a positive note.
It does. And Spenger mentions that the diary itself is designed to last for 6 months, and it's got dedicated sections for weekdays, a habit tracker, even some extra space for notes or ideas. He and his wife have been using it consistently for a couple of years now and say it's super helpful, even when they're traveling and their routines are all over the place.
I can see how that kind of consistent practice could make a real difference, especially for our listeners, with their demanding schedules. Just taking those few minutes each day to focus on the positive, on gratitude.
It's powerful stuff. And Spenger doesn't shy away from the fact that negativity can be a big roadblock to enjoying the journey. Whether it's, our own internal critic or negativity we encounter in our interactions with others, he's got some really practical advice for breaking those negative cycles.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. What does he suggest?
It's all about consciously shifting the focus of conversations. Instead of getting sucked into complaining or dwelling on setbacks, he recommends asking positive, learning-oriented questions.
Interesting. So reframing the narrative.
Exactly. And he gives some great examples that we can use right away. Things like, what's one thing you learned today? That immediately steers the conversation toward growth. Or what's a new experience you had? Encouraging people to notice the novelty, the potential for positive surprises.
I like that.
You can also ask, what surprised you in a positive way today? Specifically drawing attention to the good stuff that might have flown under the radar. And my favorite, where did you feel a sense of joy or flow today? Tapping into those intrinsic motivators and positive emotions.
It's like if we go back to that Buddha quote about happiness being the road, these questions are prompting us to actively look for those moments of happiness in our everyday experiences, even if they're not tied to some big achievement.
Absolutely. And the cool thing is, by consistently asking these kinds of questions, you can gently steer conversations away from complaining and toward more, constructive, insightful reflection.
And as leaders, as business owners, that's a pretty powerful tool, right? To shape the energy and the tone of our teams.
Huge. Just imagine the shift if you started incorporating these questions into your team meetings or your one-on-one check-ins.
It's taking a proactive role in shaping the narrative, both internally, like you said, with our own thoughts, and externally in our interactions. It's not about ignoring the challenges, but also intentionally highlighting and learning from the positive side of things.
Let's bring it all together for our listeners. Today's deep dive into Markus Spenger's 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 podcast has really been about recognizing and appreciating the journey itself, not just getting fixated on the destination.
Right. We talked about the arrival mentality and how it can actually prevent us from seeing the good stuff that's happening right now.
And we explored Felix Gottwald's story, how he found more fulfillment by being fully present in the process during his second Olympic journey.
We also got into some practical tools, like the 6-minute diary, for building those daily habits of mindfulness and gratitude, and that technique of consciously shifting our conversations toward the positive, asking those learning-focused questions to interrupt the negativity.
All of this really reinforces that idea that happiness isn't some future state we achieve. It's something we cultivate, something we find in the present moment.
By being more mindful, practicing gratitude, and intentionally looking for the positive in our experiences, we can gain more clarity, sharpen our focus, and create more balance in our lives, even, in the midst of demanding careers and all the pressure that comes with that.
So we definitely encourage everyone listening to check out Markus Spenger's 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 podcast. Look for that specific episode where he dives into these ideas. It's full of actionable strategies and inspiration.
And depending on where you're listening to this deep dive, you should find a link to the 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 podcast in the show notes. Super easy to find.
Awesome. And to wrap things up, we want to leave you with this. As you're navigating your own path, what's one small intentional step you can take today to more fully appreciate the journey and find a little more happiness right where you are? It's a question worth pondering until our next deep dive.
Until next time.
Take care, everyone.
Ready to stop chasing and start living? Book your free clarity call at markusspenger.com or download your free clarity report to gain focus, build inner strength, and live with direction and purpose. Because, life is too short to just function. It's time to lead from within. Be bold, be clear, be you.